Jill here with Sirius Dallas Moon, and this is going to be a little bit of an energy reading. Now, I'll begin with an anecdote and then connect it to that energy reading and to what I mean by that. When we talk about isolated space or secluded spaces, basically it is building a world, okay, that is supposed to model something, and that model is supposed to look very real. And in those spaces, worldviews, beliefs, relational patterns are created. And then coming out of the secluded group to the world that is not fully facilitated by um, the conditions that created the secluded. Now, the secluded is not necessarily in one space, but it can actually be throughout time and space. For example, the secluded group can be when people, let's say, travel and meet only people from the group, whether they are aware or not. Now, once the veil of that secluded group is thinning and they begin to meet the world, um, both good and challenging things can happen because we are going from a model of something into an actual unexpected reality. Now, um, a secluded, the secluded can be very shielding and protective, or the other way around. And this is something that's important to remember. Um, and I can give an example. 7th of October, there was what the people confined within the state of Israel saw. And I don't have a bird's view, so what the people saw: horrid ritual of human sacrifice, eureka as to things that many of them have been gone through in spiritual warfare, and those that did not know about ritual abuse, wealth consolidation, done by ritual abuse, that is way bigger than a country, um, that for maybe, how should I say that? They would have been the closest of proximate to trying to find who are the people within that cooperated from the people outside that created this horrid massacre that any sane person that would see that would say, whoever is took part in that, um, all of them to be not tortured, not none of that, not to be like them, just completely exterminated. That was probably not what the people in Gaza were seeing, and definitely not what the world would be seeing just 12 hours later. While the people confined to the borders of Israel were asking, where were you 12 hours or 8 hours? Meaning the army that delayed in responding or that got to some places and not others. The world was seeing something completely different, where Israel was looking more like Nazi Germany, and the gap between the frames was preserved by the confinement of seclusion. You couldn't get a plane and go off board. In fact, what the people that were secluded in Israel that were abroad were basically participating in is a worldview where They got on board on the plane to save their people and go risk their lives in basically Gaza. And the maintaining of these at least two or three secluded worlds took beyond despicable amount of effort. Now, this is one thing that comes before the Saturn Neptune. And I began in previous episodes to address the fact that it is those countries that we don't have the empathy for that are a study case that we need to look at. If we look at Nazi Germany and we say the German way, then we got nothing. It's not that it wasn't sitting on the culture of Germany, the emblemming of the Nazi Party. But we should not be fooled that it cannot happen to any culture. And in a situation of a global conflict, and I mentioned the leftover women in the case of China, okay, the fact that if Netherlands had a red light district, in other countries in Asia, geisha was a trend symbol, and I even saw um, an Asian video in perfect English about a woman. Let me give a shout out to the channel, in fact, about a woman that idealized the geisha lifestyle, and when she ran into that in praxis, she became so convoluted that she would murder her lover completely in consent with her lover that wanted to please her after she's been so abused as geisha. And kind of like the story of Isis and Osiris, amputated his genitals, and not as revenge but worshipped his genitals to try to possess that which loved her. Because the grand missing in that culture where cities of geishas existed of the people that were the poor in society that were sold by their parents if they showed signs of promiscuity. What that does to a culture, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, okay, it's very easy to emblem on such society femicide. And it can be a very rich culture. Japan gave us Ikigai. Japan gave us the old and the new. Japan gave us gardens that, you know, that are a cultural symbol as well as a spiritual sanctuary. Japan gave us 100 years old people, and Japan gave us the five colors food. And yet, in one go, bam. This can happen to any culture. It's both the cultural shadow work and the notion that the Nazi case was not a private case. Or for the people that see Israel as Nazi Germany, Israel is not a private case. How did they get people to say K3000? By, by showing them the ritual abuse, photos and videos that were running in the internet and were not AI, by using dark occult. And only after people came back from the war, they go to a therapist or to a healer that is outside the system they don't trust the system anymore after that. And they say, well, I also raped, am I like Hamas, while going to Thailand and raping children for money, or to Romania and raping teenagers, basically what Epstein did, was something that was considered a part of human life, so much so that a police commander, a retired police commander of a region, of entire South region, his spousey and his child that's younger than me could sit next to me in the train with him bragging about the time that he purchased a trafficked girl that told him she wants to eat something in the supermarket and ran away and posed that as a stunt. Well, there are at least 52 under the guise of orthodoxy trafficking places which are funded by classified projects and funnel their income into investments that are not disclosed to the public and include public money, while targeting more individuals and depriving more and more people of housing and income. Okay? And this is not one country case, it is many countries' case. Um, just yesterday, there was an article in a Belgian newspaper and a Dutch newspaper about a 56 years old father that abused children in the basement, and a la Marc Dutroux, and it was in one or two newspapers. That's it. Now, the shout out that I wanted to give, let's see if I can find it before we go on to the next point. The next point is Greenland, Denmark, Trump, and NATO. Dark Asia with Megan. So, Mars still 22 in, Mercury 19 degrees, opposing Jupiter. The moon is a planet to conjunct black monolith. And the next point is a small conversation I had regarding Greenland and NATO. And this is on a page where they were asking Greenlanders how they feel about the possibility that Trump is going to buy NATO, and the comment section. And of course, Greenlanders are not happy with it. They see themselves as Greenlanders. Um, and so one of the comments says, Greenland is a part of NATO as being a part of, and the European Council by being a part of Denmark. Now, here is something about such lines of thought. They are not wrong on paper, but we cannot understand the move of Trump to purchase Greenland without understanding that Greenlanders don't see themselves as a part of Denmark, but there is a Greenland flag. Not knowing that and not addressing that in praxis is not understanding what is Donald Trump doing upon putting the structure in a place where it works against itself. Because to say that United States is an ally invading an ally, meaning invading Denmark, puts Greenland in a situation where Denmark is an ally invading an ally, because territorially Greenland is a part of NATO and the European Council. And Trump knows that. That's the type of moves he loves doing. Okay, he's a Gemini. Is he doing it in favor of humanity? I don't know. I think he's doing that because he loves playing with structure. Would Greenlanders be happier under United States? I don't think they prefer that over that. They want to be sovereign country. Now, this is an anecdote that leads me to the third point, and that's the deeper energy reading. In many secluded places, people were never or hardly ever presented with acting on their internal truth since children. And yet, that thing that burns as the internal truth is not easily extinguished. This is why it would take repetitive, okay, years to try to extinguish or turn over nature. And still, I make the analogy of a babushka. Okay, the babushka is those um, Russian set of doll inside a doll inside a doll. But what's interesting about it is that if you drop it to the side, it climbs back up, it jumps back up. And the human soul is a bit like a babushka. The cohesion of truth is a bit like it's the fire that burns and creates a cohesive identity. And what I'm seeing is, alongside the Saturn Neptune, the unification of that cohesion into an I am. And this basically souls and people that that have not been or have been secluded from the place where they can burn in their truth, not burn as to go extinct or to be harmed, but or to become inflamed, but burn in the truth in the sense of extinguish that which is a lie within and around them. They're meeting those soul flames, whether in physical being or not, that are burning in their truth, not becoming inflamed, but speaking and acting in spirit and in matter on their authentic truth, their authentic I am, which negates, in Aries, the I am negates violence because it defends life. And the convoluted structures that were made to make that spirit go extinct run into a global and collective babushka phase. Okay, I want you to think about, and here's the thing, it's not about people being better or not than others. Um, when I remember I was um, in between houses in the Netherlands, and I was sitting on a bench in the pipe feeding the duck. And the Abraham Hicks notion, I was channeling at the time, and I received in channeling, there were children playing outside. It was a man spirit that was channeling with, that I was channeling or was present with me, and he said something that would be familiar to my world, which would be Abraham Hicks. And he said, we're looking at the children and say, it's good we're sitting here. We are on the periphery of the problem. Close enough so that we can see the problem. Okay, meaning the children. Okay, but far enough that we are not so enmeshed in the problem that we can't see the solution. So, um, shout out to whoever was that spirit, and I'm eternally grateful. People have to masquerade themselves as all many things, but any help that I got when I was in that situation, um, which hopefully was not the person that put me in that situation, because sometimes they worked in that way as well. But that was creating a good memory that sustains. And and this is when I talk about people burning in their flame of truth, it's just like me and that person that was there in the astral or in spirit, sitting there looking at the children while I was homeless, needing to be outside of the shelter during the day, feeding the duck um, and looking at the children playing. Um, having a joke about that we were simply far enough from the problem. And then I came back to Israel before 7th October and during. Okay, but there we were basically far enough from the problem so that we could see the problem, and close enough to see, far enough to come up with a solution. Those are the people that are burning in their flame of truth. They're not better, they're not worse. They have the privilege of location, location, location. Real estate is also Mars. And they're burning in their flame of truth, and the veil is thinning, so the people that are exposed to them, or to the timeline frequency and vicinity, begin to be able to transform and cross neural thresholds. And that's the point about it, okay? It's a time and space. It's not that person um, is better than that person or stronger than that person. No, time and space, okay? Even people that were within these societies, Annika Lucas, when she was a child, she felt that spirit of support. Other people that didn't ended up massacring people. It's time and space in spirit and in matter. People that were closer to the timeline of unconditional benevolent love, even through their perils, managed somehow to be those of them that didn't die, and can burn in that truth even while outside. And that is okay, and that is and even though the people that are aligning with that truth cannot always see that, they cannot always see who is that person, and some of them may never, like it's, but it is aligning with our truth and that true cohesion that matters. It's a frequency thing. Okay, moon ingressing into Sagittarius conjoining Black Moon Lilith reminds us again that Sagittarius comes after Scorpio. And so Jupiter here, also we have to remember that Pisces comes after Aquarius. The ocean of Pisces comes after the scientific architectural phase of Aquarius. So the helplessness of Pisces is the miraculous healing, the delving into the deep of the void, where the miraculous healing cannot be found by words. This is where we have from Allow to the beginning of tropical Pisces. The psychic resonance, the architect, the claircognizant, and even the astrologer fall flat at Fomalhaut. And it's not about humbling. As I was thinking earlier today and yesterday about this Great War, or Ba'adin the Great War, mass anonymous graves, okay, I was taking something from the fridge and thinking, well, it's a good thing to contemplate. What if you knew that you live your whole life and you might end up, or you're going to end up, as an anonymous grave? How would you live your life then? Okay? And there is something, when we think about legacy, and so it's not about punishment and not about anything. It's something that could happen to anyone. In such megalithic Neptunian events. Now I know that people are talking about, resonance and frequency and so on and so forth. But it was also a thought experiment, because as I was seeing how certain timelines, just for the people that are so attached to legacy, could lead into them ending up as an anonymous grave in the Great War, I was like, well, just like in any good fight, I don't look into the eyes of the enemy without looking into the eyes of my soul and asking myself, well, that's an interesting thought experiment. How would I live my life if I knew there's a chance that I would end up as an anonymous grave? The relief of that. Now, I come from a family, third generation to Holocaust. My grandfather and his brother ran away. They were, I think, 16, 14 people that died in the Holocaust. I don't know their names. I don't know their faces. In fact, the family pictures were remaining in a place that was said to be a human trafficking place. Then they murdered a cat and then they evacuated the neighbors by that. I don't even know who did that. Everything's so anonymous. And it was just fascinating how the pictures of the remains of basically the Holocaust, in my case of the Second World War, where lineages were wiped out. The pictures of my grandfather and my grandmother, that and some maybe of the family, and vanished in the same events that funded, that there was Jewish, probably lineage of the same Jewish organization that trafficked people and children and worked with the Nazis in bloodletting rituals. So um, that's the truth. Okay, that's basically also how it was possible to send so many Jews and loot their property and land, do identity thefts. I mean, the family of my grandfather is coming from Sarney, but the fact that there were 14 people, they probably didn't live in a tent, is what I'm saying. And probably that real estate had minerals underneath. And it's not that I would say, oh, let's move to Sarney today. I don't think that would be a good settlement. um, but the reason that I'm saying that is basically it was 14 people that not even, and even the family named Zudler went almost extinct. I think maybe we have one family member that keeps it. I did not find traces of the family name. So, when we think about family name, think, well, my Dutch ancestors were Jungblood, and some of the families married to De Vries, which means it's kind of like Cohen and Levy in Jews in Jewish names, or where even people know, Cohen brothers or Leonard Cohen, or okay. So I'm not saying Suler was that big of a family name, but it went at least for the Hebrew speaking world and the English speaking world extinct. Think about Jungblood or De Vries family name going extinct. There is something about this this notion that puts in perspective literally everything. And here is another thing. It's not, how should I say that? Neptune Saturn meeting in 0 degree Aries and then 1 degree Aries, where Aries in Aries was during the Great Depression. What do you think I say to myself and to my I just went today or yesterday to my mom, and I said, Mama, this month, okay, on the paycheck, if there is something that, let's say if tomorrow you wouldn't be able to buy anything, and there is something that you would miss, and sometimes these are the small things. It can be a box of chocolates. And and in those times, people think less of whether it's ethically sourced or not. I think about when I was in Netherlands, and somebody in the Israelis in Netherlands group um, had black coffee, Turkish coffee. I went from the shelter to meet that person in the pipe and got that Turkish coffee. I hardly ever drank a Turkish coffee in Israel. It is not for nothing that every time I have um, ticket where the weather is safe to travel in Tel Aviv because it is so hot in the summer that it's impossible, I go to the shop Beatrice, which is the Dutch shop. In fact, when I was studying Dutch, I had a friend that was living around Tel Aviv, and she was bringing when we the cookies that cost €1.50 in the Alberghein, which is the marzipan cookies. That's what I was eating when I was homeless, because if people would give maybe €1 or €2, then I was able to buy that. And in fact, it was the first thing I bought when I got there. And to me, it was like a childhood memory. It inherited from my mother because she remembered those cookies. And many times she tried to say, we have to find a recipe of how to cook it here. It cost €1.50. And I said, I gave you money. It was back then 10 or 20 shekels. Like, I give you money, please buy me, please get me those cookies. I need them for my mama. €1.50 is the most, it's delicacy. Let's just put things where they are. It's delicacy. But it's the most simple thing you could buy in Albert Heijn to not starve. They don't have the Dutch chocolate. It's a crime against humanity. But they have chocolate, but it's not the Dutch chocolate. Um, but this is something where, first of all, I want to say this to everyone. Now, in the best case, probably, and you'll be surprised, probably the thing you would want to buy the most if the world goes Great Depression on a world scale, probably it's that €1.50 marzipankuchen. And even if that's all capitalism stood for, we're really gonna miss that. With all due respect to stroopwafel. And when I was in Netherlands, I didn't get the point with the stroopwafel. I was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then we had a place called the Macomb where they were offering us home cooked food. If I could stand on my feet, then I would volunteer there because I cannot stand on my feet. It's basically if they make this place, I think it's kind of risky for me to be in there. But it's kind of risky for me anyway. So um, I'm absolutely not joking. If they make the work there or the volunteering there disability friendly, and I have like a place to sleep, then I would gladly serve food to people that don't have food. And they treated us so respectfully. Absolutely not joking. Most of my problems with workplaces were simply corruption. So it is, it is true. That and the fact that it's difficult for me to stand on my feet. But then I tasted that stroopwafel and I was like, I was totally underestimating the power of the addictive power of this thing. It's a sticky biscuit. It's for those who don't know what it's about. And the medical system in Netherlands don't have don't, they won't have an appointment on time with the doctor. So that's a real life risk for the motherland. It's but in Israel we don't actually have Israeli food. Well, we can't say croquette and nasi bol and bami bol because those are Indonesian. But that's hey, they're Suriname and Indonesian, and two words. um, what the Palestinian mansaf? um, that probably every dish we have in Israel. Um, yeah, we don't have bacon and eggs here. I mean, we can get bacon, but it's not. But there would be a Palestinian mansaf. Like I said, it was a global infiltration. Israel and Palestine would never go to war. Um, I think the only war would be with Jaime, which is, albeit the Yiddish name, it is basically what Yiddish in Dutch is. It's Jaime. It's a it's a Moroccan spicy fish. You see that Mercury is opposing Jupiter. Moroccan spicy fish and Dutch chocolate. Uh, the um, the elimination of that joke. If you got it, you got it. If you didn't, you don't want to know. Now, so takeaways from this. When I talk about people that burn in their flame of truth and so on and so forth, I really am talking about a spirit and matter um, geoneural disposition that maintained or regained certain frequency, and just more people are going to approach the threshold where they can reconnect with their truth. And again, I'm not ideating, it usually is burning all the lies within and outside. And it's not an easy task, okay? And it is usually not voluntarily happening. Aries is the sign of necessity. Um, However, it does mean that a lot of people that got used to um, not having the right thing promoted will run into people that did the right thing anyway quite consistently. And while they're definitely coming from different places, upbringings, um, and so on and so forth, um, it's not even about they're gonna have to adjust. It's about some of them at least are gonna have access to choice that they never had to be. Think about a person who is in anxiety meeting a person who is grounded through the storm. No, the person in anxiety is not to blame that they are in anxiety. The person who is grounded through the storm is not blamed that they're grounded through the storm. They're not better or worse. They're just a pillar of calmness to the person in anxiety. And so I definitely see that with the thinning of the veil and the Saturn Neptune. And I hope I made myself clear enough so that you would understand I'm not talking about the mythical superhuman warrior and so on and so forth. I'm just talking about the dispositions and the veil of isolation thinning, um, and that allows those that burned in their truth but were inflamed because they couldn't assert themselves to break through the walls of their ghettos and start being themselves maybe for the first time. It's not that those coping mechanisms didn't sustain them through everything in their secluded ghettos, and those secluded ghettos could be elite mansions. I remember when I watched the interview of um, Albina and her sister with a privileged few. So Albina's rebellion as a child, as a teenager, was to sit so-called in the smoking and drinking area of a restaurant. Okay? Her sister would travel abroad every now and then. The sister came back, albeit somewhat naive, very connected to the fact that there is more than just business or making money. Now again, it's not like Albina grew up in it's just business. No, it's a family business and so on and so forth. Um, but the one that was permeating the seclusion of the cohesive family unit came back with more cultures and traditions embedded that shifted the perspective in a way that, um, for example, smoking a cigarette and having a drink, I'm not saying it cannot, but it's not it's not the same perspective because when it's about giving up smoking and giving up drinking, one is healthier. But giving up traveling is not advised. And then Albina herself, as the younger sister, became um, a woman that does content creation in the age that everything is going AI and tries to bridge the gap. And even if something began as, I don't think it began as virtue signaling, but even if it did, it will highly unlikely to stay there once that signal is taken as a signal and not noise. And that is also an Aries archetype. Okay, I have Mercury in Aries, and one trick that I did when I was a TA. Some students would say they're sick and they couldn't submit essays on time and so on. And so I had a colleague and she said, I know this person wasn't sick. I know this. I had another technique. If a student, let's say, oh, my parent, I don't know, was sick and so on, throughout the end of until the end of the semester, I would come and ask, how are they doing? How is their parent doing? How is everyone doing? If they were authentically true to me, they saw that they would see that I care and are not abandoned in a system that I would later find out has human trafficking in it. If they were lying to me, they would feel so convoluted in their own lie that it would be way too emotionally costly to come up with that excuse again. If they went through both these thresholds, to begin with, I'm not the one who could stop them. And so Aries is that logos. Okay. Aries is that logos that is so connected with reason because Aries comes after Pisces. We underestimate, we think, oh, Aries is the first sign in the zodiac. Aries comes after Pisces. What does it mean that Aries comes after Pisces? If Pisces can hold the entire truth of the universe true, Aries is the cohesive truth that emerges into the I am and takes action. Okay? It doesn't come before Pisces, it comes after Pisces. Just as Sagittarius doesn't come before Scorpio, it comes after Scorpio. Scorpio is to transform, to delve into the deep and transform from the core. So Sagittarius, that's what Scorpio is about. It's the water of the well. It's a visit to the abyss. Now, the nodes of the moon run in reverse too, but people that only hold the upside down, okay, the eclipses or the black sun, they don't see the full picture of the world. Just as to ignore the fact that there are eclipses is to assume a linear progress, which couldn't be farther from the truth. Okay, Rahu and Ketu, they go retrograde all the time. They basically go upside down or the other direction to the rest of the zodiac, except for the retrograde phase, of course. And they are the eclipse nodes. So those who are very connected with the eclipse nodes may tend to see the world as an upside down to the way others see the world, but they also must take into account that not the whole world is upside down. And it's going to be very relevant for the Saturn Neptune because 3 days later we have an eclipse. And I think a lot about the eclipse is going to be eclipsing the upside downness of the world. Okay, because if the eclipse nodes would be the inverted logic that serves as to understand the complete picture. Okay, what if we took the clock and moved it the other direction? That's basically the nodes in the eclipse. And the reminder we have with both Saturn Neptune and the eclipse that prompts, just a couple of days after the meeting, the eclipse that prompts the Saturn Neptune meeting, zero Aries, is, and it's going to be an Aquarius infused eclipse, even if by the merit of Saturn. And this is basically um, going to show us something with the upside down logic, the inverted timeline, the timeline of inversions in eclipse, which means that both the world and those who see the world upside down and act on it, okay, those who worship the black sun, both will have an eclipse that shifts their mindset. Now, again, those that have Rahu's there, it's going to be not very different and not too different from the eclipses we had with Rahu, Saturn, Venus, and Neptune. Okay, Rahu, they say Rahu is the Maya or the illusion. And I can say, for example, when I looked at astrocartography line, I saw first my Rahu, and only then I saw that in some of the places, or particularly in the Rahu timeline, I would have my 22 Mars in the 12th house. It's not that I didn't see it, but that Rahu, because we're meant to incarnate there, I think about it as the promised land, and I don't mean a particular land. There were so many countries that were the promised land. Um, in fact, one of the people that connected me with that idea would later fear women channeling, and and he talked to me about the Druids when I was doing an essay, and that was while it didn't end up being a main point in that essay, it did affect my thinking a lot, and that was a great contribution, intellectually and spiritually, because many places were called Jerusalem, and many countries were the Promised Land. And so, when we think about the Promised Land, we think about an expedition into an unknown, uncharted territory. If people wouldn't have a Maya, an illusion, around this place where their soul has never ventured, and now that soul can be a red ocean. Okay? For example, um, if I take a look at the ruler of Rahu, where it's at, it's I would never think that I would, after being homeless for so long, live in an apartment. I would take the rest of the situation away a little bit, because that situation was connected with something global. And so I would never think that I would live in one of the best neighborhoods in a village that was overseeing the Dead Sea right before the wealth consolidations on the rare earth minerals, gas, and oil underneath me, as I lie on the ground looking at the stars. And the understanding of what it means, and I was not looking for, I was looking for an apartment. Even the way that I arrived, I was calling to see an apartment in the city, and then I was in delay, and so I would meet a person that owned the real estate, which unfortunately um, probably structurally had to be a trafficker. And I had no idea of these things. I was just looking for an apartment, and he said, no, 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 no.